Hello and welcome to the first episode of a new video series that I will be starting called The World of Erudain. My name is Dungeon Master Jake, also known as the Chaos Gamer, also known, well, I have other names, but this isn't going on Twitch, so that doesn't matter. Um, this is a series where I am going to make very short videos, just kind of describing and going over various places in my campaign's World of Erudain, using it as kind of audio notes because I am a bit of a mess when it comes to writing stuff down. So I'm kind of explaining the series, and I will get on to episode 1 in a bit. This will be episode 1 covering the Valtene Empire. But yes, this is going to just be my audio logs. We're going to do a lot of these. I'm going to be trying to upload these fairly regularly. I also have some bigger projects planned, but my schedule is very hectic right now. The holidays are hitting me pretty tough, so look forward to some bigger videos coming up. The campaign will be, I have one video planned to come out later this week, and then the campaign will be resuming in January. But until then, I will have a few smaller projects, some gaming stuff, a lot of these hopefully World of Erudain videos, and those will hopefully fill up the channel. But I'm only going to be recording this one for right now because it's very late and honestly I should be in bed. But let's cover it. So this will be episode 1, the Valtene Empire. Okay, so to cover what the Valtene Empire is, it is one of the countries on the Durante continent, commonly called the Human continent. The Valtene Empire is where we started our campaign this time around. In previous versions, it was kind of a far-off enemy country, but in this time, I decided to start my characters here. The original idea behind the Valtene Empire, and this is very early in development before I started actually writing stuff, key figures, the history of it, was just inspired by general evil empires in writing. Classic being just the Empire from Star Wars. So they were originally the nameless bad guys, but I have since developed them, of course. The Valtene Empire, just a quick overview, is it is one of the 4 great powers of the Drontai continent, known because it's in this mountainy terrain, so it has a ton of natural mountainous resources. There's a few other countries with that as well, but those ones are very isolated. So the Valtenes have a lot of minerals, but because it's a mountainous region, it's not very good for crops and agriculture. We only have this area of green over here, which is where most of the food comes from. So the Valtene Empire has, again, the best mineral rights of almost any country on the Dronte continent. It has the most and kind of best equipped general soldiers, and it has the biggest population or close to. Again, the countries don't exactly keep it up with what their population is, and some countries have much more land, but they're more spread out. The Valtene Empire is a very condensed country, so all of its people live very densely packed, but they don't have a lot of food. They don't even have enough food to be self-sustainable, which is an issue. Which is why the Valtene Empire tends to be viewed as a very aggressive nation. They want the land of other nations because they want to be self-sufficient. They want this. But the lack of food, among other stuff, causes issues within the country. They make up for it with their mineral rights, but they'd rather keep their own minerals. They their iron ore, their gold, their silver, all of that other rare minerals, but they have to sell a lot of it because they have to import food. So this has some economic recourses. So the Valtene Empire, again, no country is perfect. Often, most of them have dark bits about them. The Valtene Empire kind of wears its darkness on its shoulder in that if you go there, it is a human supremacist nation. Now, the Valtene, or the Drantai continent, is the human continent. It is mostly populated by humans. Almost all the nations, besides the Dwarven one, which I will briefly cover in a smaller video, are run by humans. So human supremacy, not that far off idea, but most of them do not have the Valtene Empire's pure racism, especially towards the more monstrous races. Tieflings, orcs are, again, treated horribly. Goblins, I mean, well, most people don't view goblins as a race. Dragonborn, while a monstrous race, are accepted mostly because the true Dragonborn nations are backed by actual dragons, but the common people wouldn't like Dragonborn. They aren't. There's not a lot of the negative laws against Dragonborn, but they wouldn't be accepted. Half orcs, tieflings, um, heck, even elves and dwarves are not really treated respectfully. Gnomes especially, but gnomes are a special case as they are a rare race, which I will cover when I do my races video of this series. Um, but yeah, no, enough about the future. The Valtene Empire is very racist, and it is, again, aggressive. It has a large army. It wants to take other land, and in the campaign so far, it has been building up its army. We're nearing a breaking point, and I've hinted, because unfortunately the players left the Empire, they haven't been back in almost 6 months, um, that the war is probably starting soon. They want to take some lands from the nearby Barutan Republic, which has the biggest fertile land and all the good stuff. Um, but so that's enough kind of overview of the Valtene Empire. Let me talk briefly about its history. There's much more history, which I will cover if the players ever learn of it, and it is in a part 2 of the Valtene Empire, because okay, another rule, I didn't establish this earlier, if the players shouldn't know something or don't know because it's not public knowledge, I will not be covering it, but if they learn it or otherwise, I might cover it in a part 2, because these videos are also my own personal notes. But the history of the Valtene Empire starts roughly 80 years ago, 80-ish something years ago, because during that time was known as what is known as, what is it? Oh yes, the World Splintering, which is a huge event. Before the World Splintering, there were really no nations, at least not on the Drontai continent. It was mostly smaller city-states, lordships, principalities, dukedoms, stuff like that. No large nations had really founded until the World Splintering, which is a much larger overall event, but basically it kickstarted a lot of stuff. And what it did was it basically kickstarted the creation of all the big nations. The Valtene Empire came about during this time when the first emperor started gaining power. And he first started gaining power because, like many of the rulers at that time, he had this huge idealistic dream. I'm going to compare this to One Piece. He had conqueror's hockey, if that makes sense to you. If it doesn't, you don't need to know. But he had this huge charisma, this huge idea. He was able to just immediately get people behind him. And that was a great factor, but that's not a guarantee. Like many other leaders, he also found certain magical additives that made him much stronger, better than the average man, so that he was able to stand out. I won't go too much into detail because that is still a secret for the players to find out. Um, but he did that, and he started in a small town. I think it was Brogian's Way near Iron Point. I'm not going to cover the whole history, but so the first empire of the first emperor, um, Lord Chrysius Valtene, uh, started. He gained power from from these magic items or magic item. He got support. People recognized him. Hey, he's strong and he has a cool idea. He wants to form a nation. And from there, the ball started rolling. He soon got many people to follow him, come under him. He would come to larger cities like Iron Point and either conquer them with his growing army, because at the time it would be a city state, or be able to talk his way into getting the leaders and the city to come underneath his wing. Um, and that is actually how a unique feature of the empire started happening is the vassal system. Um, the vassal system is very unique in that the emperor would have these people under him, and they would be considered like special knights. They were lords and knights and such, and they basically they if you want to consider a video game, they were his party members. He was the hero and they were his supporting cast, but they were able to share in his exploits, and all of their exploits would go back to him and various other things, which is this created the special vassal system for the empire, and it still exists to this day. But because the empire is no longer as powerful, any noble is allowed to create vassals. Many don't, or the vassals just don't do anything because the empire has been stagnating for a while. It has its ups and downs, but no real turnover has happened where like these huge acclaims can happen. Um, but the vassal thing is an important cultural part of the empire, which is why I'm bringing it up here. It's probably also dragging this video on because I'm catching on ideas. Anyway, the empire, the emperor Chrysius Valtene, uh, Valsian actually, but the Valtene Empire was plural of his name, started spreading out throughout the nation. He made several major allies, especially in the big cities. Iron Point, Trinus, Fiellian's Pass was not a huge city at the time, but there was an amazing, massive battle in Fiellian's Pass, where Lord Fiellian was able to hold back Chrysius for several days before being conquered, and that's how the name came about. And he later joined the emperor as one of his close aides, but he was able to stop the emperor for several days, just partially because of his great, oh God, what is it? His great ideas, his mind, his strategy, as well as just Fiellian's Pass's location wise. So he spread out, he conquered this whole area, he set up a capital in the middle of it so that he could reach everywhere. The city of Trinus, massive fortress city, was not actually conquered, but his army went outside of Trinus. Trinus has never been conquered, and the Lord of Trinus at the time was like, well, I see you have an army. You are very powerful. You could probably siege us out. Let us join your cause. And it was like that for several people. So the empire started growing and it accumulated this massive army. And they start heading east and outward, spreading outward. You know, they hit Stonewall. And well, there is a fortress here now. There wasn't originally, but this is just their border with the dwarves. But they did capture like Alburnus, and they were starting to get into the plains of the continent. Let me show the map of the continent. Here we go. So yeah, he started spreading out into the holy city of Zenora's land, which has a lot of land, the Barutan Republic's land, and at the same time that he was creating his army and uniting his people into this massive army, the other nations were also starting to unite to form much larger nations. The Barutan Republic was formed from a bunch of merchants getting together. Holy City of Zenora is basically all the various religions gathered together to create this massive holy city. Um, Irentiel, the Northern Federation, Almir, Eltria, kind of Triscan, but Triscan's been always been a weird outland. Uh, so they had this huge army, and the people realized it's like, no, this is an army bigger than any we've seen before. And the people of the Baru Republic is like, no, we don't want to have this massive war. We don't want to give up our land. This is great cropland, yada yada. So basically, the Barutan Republic, Zenora, Eltria, technically all nations got together and formed a United Nations army to stop the Valtene Empire's advances. Uh, the biggest ones was Barutan Republic, Zenora, and Eltria, but there was people from all the nations there, and they did. The Valtene Empire could no longer grow. The Valtene Empire could no longer grow. Its army was not. It was stopped at Alburnus because there was an equal-ish sized army just waiting, and at that point, basically a ceasefire was came together because it's if they were to fight, the casualties on both sides would just deal too big of a blow. Now the Empire didn't really take that lying down. They're like, we're going to come back, we're going to conquer it one day, but you have a city of wizards, you have a city of clerics and paladins, you have the best farmland, you have at least three other nations giving you more troops. We will bide our time. We will look for some more secrets to get this. We will not back. We will stop here, but our anger will continue to grow. We will conquer this continent one day. And unfortunately, 80 years passed. The Chrysius died, unfortunately, and with him the empire lost that amazing leader. You know, the emperors after him were not bad. There is two other emperors and then our current emperor. So in total, in the history of the Valtene Empire, there's been four. Chrysius was amazing, uh, but his son and grandson were honestly mediocre to pretty bad, but they ruled fine, but they didn't have that charisma. And so they made preparations for the conquering of the continent. It didn't go very well. The current emperor has actually made some strides. He is trying very hard. He is at this point getting his armies ready. He's conscripting people. He's getting the weapons made, and he's consolidating his power. Because once the Valtene Empire uh, did rest, basically five duchies were created from Chrysius's best allies. There was Iron Point. This is a fortress city with just some of the best resources in the continent, mineral wise, outside of the dwarves. Iron Point would be ruled by one of the dukes. Fiellian's Pass is an amazing trade route to get to the only port of the empire. Trinus stayed a duchy. Stonewall was created as a duchy, and Alburnus was already a city, but it was given as a duchy. So Trinus and Iron Point are resource collecting cities, already existing natural fortresses, and they control a lot of the mineral rights of the continent. Fiellian's Pass controls a lot of the trade routes. Stonewall is our barrier from the dwarves, because the dwarves have always been neutral, but because the Empire is racist, we decided to keep a divide, and Alburnus is the to guard our our agricultural resources and to prepare for our armies to march forward and get the rest of the continent. There's also, again, Valtene in the center. It is kind of the core of the continent and the country, and it's where a lot of the nobles live. It's where the emperor's family lives, and it gets the best resources. It gets the best trade, but it's not like the other cities. We also have Seawell. Seawell came later. It is the major port city of the empire, which allows it to trade with other countries on the continent. Unfortunately, the sea works very interesting, so they have to go all the way around to the Barutan port before they can start going to other continents and trading. But this allows for sea trade, and yeah, it facilitates trade throughout the empire. Let me think. I think we have covered most of the history, the locations of the empire. Trinis, fortress city in the mountains. It has this massive mountain backing behind it that is almost inscalable, especially by an army, and it has very good walls. So the city itself has never been conquered. Iron Point is a pretty squat fortress. Some believe that parts of it were built by the dwarves, and it works as kind of a very defensible point. It has massive underground networks because it connects to many mines and many resources. Fielion's Pass, I actually haven't covered this in this video, is a strange city built in a cliffside, and the city is built in layers. So running along the side of the canyon between these mountains. And so the top layer has sunlight, it's where the rich people live, and then as you get lower and lower to the bottom, the fifth layer is very dark, and that's where the miners and the lower class live. It was controlled by a duke, but he was not happy with the current state of the empire. He tried to rebel at one point during the campaign. The players stopped him, stopped his plan of infecting the people to turn them basically into magical, controllable monster zombies that he would use as his own army. Really cool story. I will cover it in the big recap I'm going to do. But now there's only 4 dukes, as well as the count who controls Seawell, and Marquis Reginald Valem Thazala, who is more a trade lord, and he has his home out over here. He is the only marquis. He rose through the ranks. He is the most powerful noble outside of the Lord of Seawell, the dukes, the emperor, which is a lot of power. And it's safe that he rivals them, as many of the other families, they got it from their familial name. He rose through the ranks and has become a very powerful noble, and he happens to be the party's ally slash backer. Let me see. Dog armor, we don't need that. I didn't realize that was written there. Okay, yes, I will describe Alburnus, large fortress on a plains. There's a lovely city surrounding it. It's where all the crops are brought, and then they are shipped in throughout the rest of the empire. It also has staging areas for an army. Those have probably been in use, as we've heard that the war has, at least to a degree, started since the party has left. And then Stonewall. Stonewall was created as a city. It's in a point where there's a major road, and it's built in such a way to keep an eye on the dwarves and be able to close off the country. Now, it's not completely great because they're dwarves. They would find a way to mine under it and around it, but it works as a kind of a watch point to protect the empire. So yeah, the empire has some of the greatest wealth because of natural resources, has great mineral rights, and has a large army and large citizenships that are going forward, going to do stuff. But I believe that covers just about every major facet of the Empire. I'm sure I've forgotten something, and there is details that I will not be going here. Anything that will happen in video 2 of the Empire when I get to that. But thank you for watching this video. This is Dungeon Master Jake signing off. Welcome to the world of Erudain, Part 1, the Empire.